We do have 5 commissioners present.
Say again.
We do have 5 commissioners present.
Okay, so we can start.
Yes.
All right. Well, we will get started with that. Happy New Year, everybody. Here we are again. We thought maybe there was a possibility we'd be meeting in person. Not yet. But let me start with the roll call of commission members, and I'll add more as they show up. If you could indicate that you can hear and see me, that would be great. Commissioner Jekowitz.
Present, and I can see and hear you.
Fantastic. Commissioner Burns.
Present, I can see and hear you.
Commissioner Fair.
Here, and I can see and hear you.
Commissioner Ponce.
Present, and I can see and hear you.
And I am Commissioner Wong, and I think that's it for right now. We'll wait when Commissioner Hughes, Commissioner Rubin, and Commissioner Cox join us. We'll add them in as they show up. We do have a quorum. In 2020, Governor Pritzker signed Public Act 101-0640, making certain amendments to the Open Meetings Act so that we, along with other boards and commissions, can continue to host virtual meetings during the COVID-19 public health emergency, provided that certain conditions are met. One of those conditions is that I, as head of the Commission on Chicago Landmarks, determined that an in-person meeting of the Commission on Chicago Landmarks and its Permanent Review Committee are not practical or prudent. I want to make sure our virtual meeting meets all the conditions of the Open Meetings Act as amended. Therefore, I'm making a determination pursuant to Section 7E2 of the Open Meetings Act that an in-person meeting of this Commission on Chicago Landmarks and its Permanent Review Committee is not practical or prudent. Similarly, I'm also making a determination pursuant to Section 7E5 that because of the disasters declared by the governor, it is unfeasible for at least one member of the Commission on Chicago Landmarks or its chief administrative officer or its chief legal officer to be physically present at the meeting place for either meeting. Pursuant to a resolution adopted by the Commission on Chicago Landmarks on June 4th, 2020, regarding the chairman's emergency rulemaking powers, I issued emergency rules governing the conduct of remote public commission meetings and provisions for remote public participation effective February 18th, 2022. These rules were posted on the Commission's website. In line with those emergency rules, today's regular Commission meeting is a virtual meeting being simulcast to the general public via live streaming. Commission meetings have been held virtually since May of 2020. Meetings are structured to minimize the chances for technical difficulties. Members of the general public have been encouraged to submit written statements in advance of the meeting, and these have been posted on the Commission's website and are available for viewing during the virtual meeting at www.chicago.gov/ccl. Further emergency rules, verbal statements by the general public for all the agenda items will take place at the beginning of the meeting. So all wishing to speak at today's meeting will be signed in to the Zoom meeting at this time. Before we hear staff presentations on the agenda items, after which we will ask to hear from owners or applicants and their teams, we will open the floor up to members of the general public who wish to comment about the items to be heard on today's agenda. Comments should pertain only to the agenda items. Members of the public wishing to comment should use the raise hand function of Zoom to indicate that they wish to speak. Members of the public not connecting via computer or smartphone and instead phoning into the meeting should press *9 to activate the raise hand function and do the same to deactivate it. I or the meeting facilitator will call out the names one by one and unmute those people. Once unmuted, speakers should give their full name and organization, if any, they represent. Each speaker is allocated 3 minutes to speak. Once all members of the general public wishing to make a comment have been given an opportunity to do so, we'll go through the agenda. I would ask that owners or applicants and their representatives, as well as aldermen, wait to speak until after the staff presentations have been made on their agenda item, and we'll call on you then. And with that, I'm not seeing any other commission members that have joined. So therefore, are there members of the general public who'd like to make comments about agenda item number 2, the report from the Department of Planning and Development for the Greater Union Baptist Church, 1956 West Warren Boulevard?
And we have Preservation Chicago.
Preservation Chicago, wonderful.
Hi, thanks. Can you hear me?
We sure can.
Hi, Mary Lou
Very good.
Seidel, Director of Community Engagement for Preservation Chicago. We are honored to support the landmark nomination for Greater Union Baptist Church. Designed by the father of the skyscraper, William LeBaron Jenney, its grand and glorious architecture is only one small part of the church's stature as an institution of hope, community, and faith for nearly a century. The community around this remarkable Richardsonian house of worship has changed dramatically over time. Greater Union flourished in its mission of providing hope, education, and opportunity to families in the area. Their youth programs gave children a solid foundation on which to build their lives in faith and prosperity. Greater Union now stands as a surviving structure amongst a sea of United Center parking lots. Yet in its doors, people can still find that peace and sanctuary. This landmark designation can help ensure it remains for decades to come. Thank you for considering this nomination. Under a minute. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Lou. Appreciate that. Is there anybody else that has signed up to speak on this item?
I don't see any other hands raised, Chairman.
All right, we'll go on to the next item. Are there members of the general public who would like to comment on the agenda item number 3, the preliminary landmark recommendation for the Netsch House at 1700 North Hudson Avenue?
We have several. The first one is Max Chavez.
Okay, Max? Floor is yours.
Hi, can you hear me?
We sure can.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Max Chavez, Director of Research and Special Projects at Preservation Chicago. We're very excited to see the Netsch House in Old Town being considered for a preliminary landmark recommendation on this month's agenda. It's a terrifically important house, certainly on a visual and architectural level. It was designed, as you could likely guess from the name, by Walter Netsch of SOM in 1974. Netsch should be a familiar name for most Chicagoans, even if they don't actually know his name, as he was the architect for the campus of UIC in 1965, the Regenstein Library at the University of Chicago, Northwestern's University Library, as well as contributing to the design of the Inland Steel Building downtown. And outside of Chicago, he's extremely well known for his cadet chapel in Colorado Springs at the U.S. Air Force Academy, which is today a U.S. National Historic Landmark. In comparison to those grand works of public architecture, the Netsch home could seem like a bit of an outlier, especially given its deceptively simple exterior. However, the way that Netsch employed his concept of field theory to inform the home's interior space feels entirely in line with the finest of his works. It's a really important home by a very important architect, which alone should be enough to landmark it. However, the Netsch House was also the longtime residence of Dawn Clark Netsch. Before serving Illinois for 18 years as a state senator, she led an effort to desegregate Northwestern's undergraduate dorms. And after serving as a senator, she was state comptroller and eventually led a historic bid for governor in 1994. She lived in the house until her passing in 2013. So as you can see, the Netsch House tells the story of not one, but two very significant figures in Chicago history. That the home's interiors are also up for landmark designation signals what we hope is a new era for preservation policy here in Chicago. The house's interior space, which was painstakingly restored by SOM in recent years, is arguably the most significant part of the home's design. So while an exterior designation would do much to protect the home from demolition or alterations, protecting the interior of the house really honors the heart and soul of this residence. And it helps to convey exactly what it is about the Netsch House that is architecturally so special and worthy of landmark status. There's countless other structures in Chicago that contain important interiors, also designed by iconic architects or fitted with fixtures made by talented artists and craftsmen. And these spaces are certainly worthy of permanent protection in order to tell a complete story about the building or a site. So we're hopeful that an eventual success in landmarking the interior of the Netsch House can help to expand the scope of how we designate landmarks in Chicago and their interiors in the future. It's a very exciting prospect. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you to the homeowners of the Netsch House, landmark staff, and the commission for taking the time to consider this very important home on many, many levels.
Thank you, Mr. Chavez. Mansour, next.
The next speaker is Diane Gonzalez.
Okay, Ms. Gonzalez,
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Can you all
Good
hear me?
we sure can.
Okay. I sent a letter which was in your packet, so I don't want to repeat everything, but again, it's a request that you consider designation for the Netch House. And I will say to you, back in 2016, we came before you with the hopes that you would not allow 1638 Sedgwick to be demolished. This is another mid-century modern that was in the Old Town Triangle, was designed by Edward Marks. Actually, the commission approved its demolition as our district designation ends with the year about 1928. So it's that very time period of this hearing that your former colleague, Houlihan, Mr. Houlihan, the commissioner, said, wow, we need to take some action here because there are many of these in Old Town. And we in Old Town had sort of ignored them. You know, they do fit the fabric, but we were so focused on the older structures. So this kind of brought us all up short. And as a result of that day, Terry Tatum was hired by the Old Town Triangle Association to come up with the mid-century context report. That was presented to the commission staff in about 2018. But today is the first one of these. We figured there were about 50 of them. This is the first one that's to be offered to you for your vote. And I think Max has spoken really well as to its reasoning to be in this designation. So I'm not going to go into any of that except to add one personal note. Those of us in Old Town knew Walter and Don, who resided here for a very long time. They not only loved their house and showed it to the neighborhood and to others, but Don was a longtime auctioneer in the Old Town Art Fair. So they were very much a part of our Triangle neighborhood. And for that, we were grateful. That's another part of their legacy is what I'm saying. And finally, as you all know, commissioners, we lost Terry Tatum in 2020, a superb researcher and a former member of the commission staff. I think Terry would be very pleased that you read his mid-century report. And I think he concluded certainly that this structure was worthy of designation. And I would hope that you would do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane.
You're welcome.
Next person.
Next person is Kendra Parzan.
Kendra,
Hello, can you hear me?
we sure can.
Excellent, thank you. Sorry. Good afternoon, Chairman Wong and members of the commission. My name is Kendra Parzan. I'm the advocacy manager for Landmarks Illinois, and I would also like to express my organization's support for the recommendation to approve preliminary landmark designation for the Netch House. It's significant clearly for its distinctive design by architect Walter Netch, but also as history as the home of Netch and his wife, Dawn Clark Netch, a longtime Illinois politician. As you've already heard, they were important members of the community. So not only does landmarking provide recognition for the house's distinctive design on both the exterior and usually on the interior, it affirms the importance of the mid-century modern infill design in Old Town, as outlined in Terry Tatum's Old Town Triangle mid-century modern context statement. My predecessor, Lisa DeCura, had the opportunity to tour the house in 2018 and speak to the owners about landmark designation. So we are very glad to see this house now come before the Commission for Landmarking and commend the owners for their commitment to its stewardship. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kendra. Mansour?
No other hands raised, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Next item, are there members of the general public who would like to comment on the agenda item number 4, the preliminary landmark recommendation for Promontory Point located at east, south Jean Baptiste, Point de Sable, Lakeshore Drive between 54th and 56th Streets. And Mansour, if you could let us know.
We have Ward Miller.
Okay, floor is yours, Ward.
Can you hear me all right, Mr. Chairman?
Sure can.
All right. Well, dear Chairman Wong and members of the Commission on Chicago Landmarks, first of all, Happy New Year to each of you. I'm Ward Miller, Executive Director of Preservation Chicago, and we enthusiastically support the preliminary landmark recommendation for Promontory Point, located just east of DuSable Lakeshore Drive between 54th and 56th Street in the Hyde Park community area. Promontory Point is indeed a special place for all Chicagoans, but especially for so many residents of Chicago's South Side. It's a much beloved site for all sorts of gatherings, including family picnics, social events, nature walks, and being just a very special site for enjoying all the aspects of our lakefront and Lake Michigan. Promontory Point as a landmark is a landmark that everyone would enjoy. Comprised of a peninsula extending out into Lake Michigan, the Point is a landfill project designed and attributed to noted landscape architect Alfred Caldwell. Caldwell is also known for his projects, most notably the Alfred Caldwell Lily Pool, a designated Chicago landmark located on Chicago's north side and it's situated adjacent to Lincoln Park Zoo. Also his design of Columbus Park with Jens Jensen on the city's west side and in the Austin community, among other projects. Caldwell was also a highly respected professor for many years at the Illinois Institute of Technology in the university's Department of Architecture, Planning, and Urban Development. He was hired under architect and department chairman Ludwig Mies van der Rohe from 1944 to 1959, and later returned in 1981 at the request of architect George Shipwright as a professor of architectural and masonry construction for second-year students, along with a theory course called Architecture and Civilization. Many of us studying at architecture at IIT were students of Professor Caldwell, and his influences and theories follow us to this day. Preservation Chicago has worked for many years with community partners, the Promontory Point Conservancy, the Hyde Park Historical Society, our preservation partners both in the community and our statewide sister organization, Landmarks Illinois. In 2002, Promontory Point was nominated as one of our Chicago's 7 most endangered places, as the point would have been severely compromised with a plan that would have destroyed the historic limestone revetments and replaced them with concrete. We have encouraged a restoration according to the Secretary of the Interior standards for Promontory Point and the revetments, and we are grateful for the more than 600 letters from individuals, residents, and elected officials that supported the preservation and encouraged the Chicago landmark designation of Promontory Point. You also have a letter on file as a record, also thanking many of the individuals that supported this, including Jack Spicer, Deborah Hammond, and others. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ward. Before we go to the next person, I'd like to acknowledge that Commissioner Cox as well as Commissioner Rubin has joined us for the record. Thank you. And I think that is it. Okay, Mansoor, next.
Our next speaker is Kendra Parzan.
Okay, Kendra, floor is yours.
Thank you, Commissioner. Once again, my name is Kendra Parzan. I'm the Advocacy Manager for Landmarks Illinois, and I am glad to have the opportunity today to briefly share Landmarks Illinois' enthusiastic support for the landmark designation of Promontory Point, and to thank you for placing this item on today's agenda. Landmarks Illinois strongly endorses the recommendation that the Commission approve preliminary landmark designation for Promontory Point. The point, as it's known, its landscape and its limestone revetment are beloved features of Chicago's lakefront. Granting this designation affirms the importance of Promontory Point to the Hyde Park community, the South Side, and the city of Chicago, and it supports a preservation approach for the treatment of the point's historic limestone revetment, identified as a significant historical and architectural feature, which is now the last stretch of intact WPA-era limestone revetment that once spanned the lakefront. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Kendra. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Preservation Chicago.
Okay.
Hi, sorry, I don't know how to change my name on this format, but it's Mary Lou Seidel with Director of Community Engagement for Preservation Chicago. Ward already spoke to the history and legacy of this place, but as a Northwest Side girl, I want to attest to weekly visits to the Promontory Point for swimming in the summertime. It's such a glorious, organic, and historic place to be in fellowship with people from all over the city of Chicago. And I highly encourage you to improve this landmark designation and advance that onto the city council so we can have this around for decades to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Lou. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is William Swislow.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
We sure can.
Okay, hi, I'm Bill Swislow. I have been researching and documenting for the last several years the rock carvings in the limestone revetments that line the lake, starting from the Indiana state line going up to Hollywood Avenue. There are about 6,000 of these stone carvings that just mostly anonymous people have carved into the lakefront. Thousands more were lost in the Army Corps projects in the 2000s, the lakefront improvement projects, from north of Promontory Point all the way up to Montrose Harbor. But there's still about 6,000 that survive. And of those 6,000, there are about 500 stone carvings lining the revetments around Promontory Point. And I like to point out that these carvings, mostly by anonymous people, represent this sort of a spontaneous collective work of art, as well as just a sort of magical, spontaneous social history of life along the lake. These carvings range from people's names, initials, hearts with names in them, some figurative carvings. There are a number of what I call bathing beauties, probably relating to the history of Promontory Point and the Nike missile facility that was there in the 40s. But these carvings were started to be made in the 1930s when Promontory Point was built, and they continue up to the present day. People are still making rock carvings around the point. So I think as a contributor to the value of the old limestone revetments, the carvings are significant. They're little known in Chicago because most people aren't looking at the rocks, they're looking out at the lake or at the landscaping, but they should be considered as part of the sort of contributing to the historical importance of the limestone revetments as they exist today. So I hope that will come under your consideration when you think about the historical value of the point. Thank you.
Thank you.
And our last speaker is Rolf Achelis. Sorry if I mispronounced.
Hi, my name is Rolf Achilles. I'd like to talk about the Promontory Point because it was a very important place for open water swimming. And I'd like to specifically point out Conrad Wennerberg, who in the 1970s and 80s, when I was out at the Promontory Point, was a major contributor to the American scene of open water swimming. And the Promontory Point played a major role in it. And the limestone blocks were the important sitting parts in the summer and into the winter for the people that were out at the Promontory Point swimming. And I think it should be a landmark designation, besides being a WPA project and a beautiful place to sit, that is the last vestige of original limestone revetments in Chicago. Everything else has been sort of interstated and made into bicycle paths and so forth, and has destroyed the lakefront in its traditional look. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Achilles.
We have two more speakers. Jack Spicer.
Okay, Mr. Spicer, floor is yours.
Can you hear me, commissioners?
Yep, Jack, we can hear you.
Good afternoon, commissioners. I'm Jack Spicer, president of Promontory Point Conservancy, and thank you for letting me speak on behalf of the community. Down here on the south side, the vote for landmarking the point and preserving the historic limestone revetment is unanimous, as I hope that your vote will be today. The entire roster of our local elected officials, U.S. Congressman Kelly, Illinois Senator Peters, Illinois Rep. Carver, Cook County Commissioner Bill Lowry, and most special of all, 5th Ward Alderman Leslie Hairston are all in favor of landmarking the point and saving the revetment. And last Sunday at a forum for 5th Ward aldermanic candidates, all 12 were asked if they wanted the point landmarked and the limestone revetments preserved. All 12 literally stood up for the point. But the real hero today is the community. Over the past 22 years, the danger of the limestone revetment being demolished and replaced with concrete, as you find on most of the Chicago lakefront today, has inspired us to work together across racial, ethnic, educational, religious, and political geographical distinctions and unite to save the point. Citizens and voters send in more than 400 letters to the commission, and landmarking will protect and preserve this unique historic structure and Alfred Caldwell's landscape design. This designation should encourage the Chicago Park District, the city, and the U.S. Army Corps to cooperate with the community to repair, restore, and when appropriate, rehabilitate the revetment according to the SOI standards. These standards legally apply here because whatever happens at Promontory Point, it will be a partially federal funded project, and the point is on the National Register. We hope these government agencies will take this designation today as an invitation to work with us, the community, to preserve the limestone revetment. The community has spent 22 years fighting to protect and preserve the revetment, and the community, its friends and allies, will keep working until the point is saved. Thanks goes to the commission and its members and staff for the stellar work getting the point on the agenda today. There's satisfaction that the commission is willing to consider supporting the community in its effort to preserve and protect the point. And thanks to our many sister organizations that have already been mentioned by Ward, and also the National Trust has been part of that group. And special thanks again to our entire roster of elected officials, in particular Alderman Leslie Harrison, who has spent almost her entire tenure fighting to save the limestone at the point. But the real hero today is the community. This is preservation and democracy in action. Thank you all very much for what you do to preserve Chicago's most special places. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jack. Next speaker.
Next speaker is Elizabeth Winkler.
Elizabeth,
Hello, yes, can you hear me?
we sure can.
Hello, commissioners. Thank you for letting me speak. I'm Elizabeth Winkler. I'm an alumna of the University of Chicago, a recent graduate, and I just want to speak, to follow up Jack, to speak as a member of the community that does open water swimming from the Points Rocks. I found an incredible community of open water swimmers at the point and would not have found them without the limestone and without the shelving that creates along the point. During COVID, a lot of us went outside, obviously, to find communities that we couldn't find indoors with the pandemic spreading. And I found a beautiful community of outdoor swimmers. And the point was the place that we would gather. People would come from the suburbs, from the north side, from the west side, and they would all gather at the point because it's just such a special place in the form that it's in. I'm sure that many of us read the Tribune. There was an article a few winters ago about these swimmers, and that really highlighted the way that the current form of the point brings people together in a way that it wouldn't be able to if it didn't have the limestone. So this is a very inexpert plea for this form to be continued with a landmark designation. It would be really, really valuable to current, former, and future students at University of Chicago, not to mention the community that's already been fighting in the area outside of the university for this designation for many, many years, as the speakers before me expressed. So I hope that you will vote for this designation. It's really near and dear to my heart and the hearts of many people that I know and love. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Winkler. Is there anybody else that have signed up to speak on this matter?
There are no other hands raised, Chairman.
Okay, wonderful. So I believe that's all the members of the general public who have indicated they'd like to speak on agenda items. So this concludes the public comment portion of the meeting. I also want to acknowledge that Commissioner Hughes has joined us for the record, and okay, here we go. Item number 1 is the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting of December 8th, 2022. Those have been included in your packet. Does anybody have any comments? If not, I'd like to ask for a motion to approve those minutes of December 8th, 2022. Is there a motion?
Chairman Wong, one question. I just wanted to make sure we acknowledge Commissioner Rubin. I didn't know if he had been identified there.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Fair. I did acknowledge that Commissioner Rubin did join us. Thank you.
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Cox. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Okay, I'm going to just quickly go through the roll call here. Commissioner Jekowitz,
Yes.
Commissioner Burns,
Abstain, I was not present at the meeting.
okay, Commissioner Fair,
Yes.
Commissioner Hughes,
Present.
Commissioner-
Sorry, approved.
thank you, Commissioner Ponce,
Present at the meeting.
and Commissioner Rubin.
Approved.
Thank you. I also approve them. Thank you very much. Item number 2 is the report from the Department of Planning and Development for the Greater Union Baptist Church in the 27th Ward. This is located at 1956 West Warren Boulevard in Alderman Burnett's ward. Commissioner Cox, want to lead us through this?
Thank you, Chairman Wong. So the Department of Planning and Development finds that the proposed landmark designation of Greater Union Baptist Church supports the city's overall planning goals for the surrounding neighborhood and is consistent with the city's governing policies and plans. Greater Union Baptist Church is located on Chicago's near west side at the highly visible intersection of West Warren Boulevard and North Damon Avenue. The area is served by the blue, green, and pink L lines, as well as many CTA bus routes. 2 blocks north of the church, construction is underway on a new Green Line station at Damon and Lake Streets that is expected to open in early 2024. It will improve public transit options for nearby residents, including tenants of the Chicago Housing Authority's Villages of West Haven complex. Adjacent to the new station, the Department of Housing is entering into a redevelopment agreement with Ringshore Development and Michael's organization to build West Haven Park IID, a new 12-story residential tower with 63 affordable residences and 33 market rate residences, and over 4,000 square feet of commercial space as an example of ETOD, equitable transit-oriented development. Neighborhood plans for the area around Greater Union include the Near West Side Plan that was adopted in 2000 and the Reconnecting Neighborhoods plans done in 2009, which both included historic preservation as an objective to balance increasing development in the neighborhood. Greater Union is also located in the Central West TIF district from 2000, which also calls for preservation of architecturally significant buildings on the near west side. More recently, the department has embarked on We Will Chicago, a citywide planning initiative, which is now in draft form. One objective of the plan is to promote Chicago's assets in South and West Side neighborhoods. The architectural history and sense of place embodied by Greater Union Baptist Church is a positive attribute for the larger West Side, and landmark designation will amplify this. Our planning work at the Department of Planning and Development is committed to design excellence, which includes strengthening the culture of our communities, committing to cultural longevity and environmental sustainability. These goals are also consistent with landmark designation of historic works of high quality design, exemplified by the Greater Union Baptist Church. Thank you. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Commissioner Cox. Does the commission have any questions for Commissioner Cox at this time? Is Reverend McRae, is Reverend McRae here today?
Yes, I am.
Like you are. Would you like to make a comment, sir?
Well, New Year, blessed New Year, and thank you. Thank you. Our people are excited with anticipation and looking forward to receiving the status of a landmark. And we're happy about that. And we want to do all that we can to make this what it should be, what it ought to be. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend McRae. Does anybody have any questions for Reverend McRae? And if not, I would like to request a motion to accept the department's report for the Greater Union Baptist Church and take the next step in the designation process to request consent from the property owner. Is there a motion?
So moved, Commissioner Hughes.
Commissioner Hughes, and second by Commissioner Burns. Do the roll call, Commissioner Jekowitz.
Yes.
Commissioner Cox.
Yes.
Commissioner Fair.
Yes.
Commissioner Ponce.
Yes.
Commissioner Rubin.
Yes.
I am also a yes. That is unanimous. Congratulations. We'll move on to the next step and get this going. Very excited about that.
Amen. Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Next item on the agenda is the preliminary landmark recommendation for the Walter Netsch House, located at 1700 North Hudson Avenue in the 43rd Ward. And I'd like to call on Matt Crawford for the report.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the Commission. For your consideration today is a preliminary landmark recommendation for the Netsch House, constructed in 1974 as the residence of its designer, architect Walter Netsch, and his wife, Dawn Clark Netsch. The house is located at Hudson and Eugene in the Old Town neighborhood, which is part of Lincoln Park. And it's also in the Old Town Triangle District, which was designated as a Chicago landmark in 1977. Obviously, at that time, the Netsch House was just completed, and it is regarded as a non-contributing building within the landmark district. But with the passage of time, it's clear that the house is significant, and this designation would ensure its preservation. So we recommend that the house meets 4 criteria for designation, including 1 for heritage. While Old Town was built up in the 19th century, it continued to develop culturally into the 20th. In the 1930s, artists like Edgar Miller and Sol Kogan acquired Victorian buildings there, like the studios at Wright, and converted these in really imaginative ways in Old Town. Another thing that happened was in 1947, the establishment of the Old Town Triangle Association, which still exists. That organization supported the neighborhood's artistic character with its annual art fair. By 1958, the Tribune saw fit to call Old Town Chicago's left bank. So it was within this cultural context that attracted the Netches to build their new home in Old Town in 1974. And they weren't alone. Noteworthy Chicago architects also designed modern residences in Old Town. This would be new infill construction around the same time. These are a few examples. So with respect to criterion 3, we believe the house has an important association with Dawn Clark Netsch. She was born in 1926 in Cincinnati and came to Chicago to study politics and law at Northwestern. She graduated with her JD from Northwestern in 1952, was the only woman in her class and first in her class. In 1965, she became the first female faculty on Northwestern's law school. Another career highlight came in 1969 when Dawn was elected as a delegate to the Illinois Constitutional Convention, which was tasked with updating the state's constitution for the first time in a century. The convention succeeded in drafting a new constitution for the state, and it showed Netsch to be a very skilled negotiator across party lines. In 1973, she became the first woman to be elected to the Illinois State Senate. And she spent 18 years in that office where she advanced Equal Rights Amendment, the Family and Medical Leave Act, and state funding for HIV care. In 1994, Dawn Clark Netsch was the first woman to run for governor of Illinois. Though she did not win, her campaign and her entire career was distinguished by good government principles and just a genuine politician. With respect to criterion 4, we believe the house meets that for its architecture. Obviously, whenever an architect designs their own house, they have essentially the ideal client. For Walter Netsch, the design of his home expresses his field theory. While the exterior of the house is restrained, the drama is really on the interior. Once you walk in, your eye is drawn up immediately to the ceiling with its frame structure of overlaid squares. The interior volume is complex. It's basically a 30-foot tall cube with living spaces arranged as platforms that radiate or spiral outward from a central core. Here's the low entrance vestibule. As you enter the house, a half flight of open riser stairs provides communication to the living area, which is this space. The interior walls are concrete block with a false joint, which creates a grid pattern that's often mistaken for tile. Above the living room, there's another level with a kitchen and a dining platform to window alcoves. Perhaps the most whimsical aspect of the interior are these two platforms, which are accessed by built-in ladders. These function merely as viewing platforms for the Netsch's large art collection. And here they are at home in around the 1990s. They remained in the house their entire lives. After Dawn Clark Netsch died, Mark Smythe and Will Forrest, the current owners, purchased the home. And they hired SOM, Walter Netsch's firm, to update the interior, kitchen finishes, floors, baths, while preserving Netsch's design. We recommend that the house also meets criterion 5 as a design of Walter Netsch. Born and raised in the South Shore, Netsch earned his architectural degree from MIT in 1943. He served in World War II, and after that returned to Chicago in 1947, where he joined the staff at SOM, where he would remain for his entire career. Netsch quickly moved up the firm. In 1951, they were hired to design a new campus for the Naval Postgraduate School in California. Netsch designed the master plan for the campus as well as specific buildings, and it established his name and reputation, a skilled planner for large and very complex projects. And so what followed in 1954, SOM was awarded the design of a new military academy, the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado. Netsch oversaw the design of this campus and its buildings for over a decade. And at the academy, he designed the cadet chapel with a series of geometric frames clad with aluminum. The complex geometry led Netsch to develop his signature design philosophy, which he dubbed field theory. It's not easy, it's complicated, but this shows how he would execute this at the drafting table. The process used overlaid grids to produce lattices. And from these lattices, he would then develop the plan and elevations of his buildings. So he designed many campuses and buildings across the country for institutions and government. But his probably most complete expression of his work is the master plan and specific buildings, most of the buildings at UIC. So I just want to show one of these as a good example of the field theory. This is the behavioral science building at UIC, clearly showing that lattice form in the plan arrangement. And then how that's expressed very prismatically on the elevations. And then on the interior. Field theory, again, it's complex and it's never been immune to critique. They're very bold architectural statements and they're clearly identifiable with their author. So in addition to the criteria, we also recommend that the house meets the separate integrity criterion. Netsch did tinker with the house during his long occupancy, including adding this window bay to the south elevation, which obviously is significant in its own right. And as I said, more recently, the current owners have updated portions of the interior, but while being very committed to respecting the design intent of the house. So the current owners have requested landmark designation, and they've specifically, in addition to being good stewards of the building and recognizing its value, they've asked us to designate the interior of the house, which via staff support. The building is located in the 43rd Ward, and Alderman Woodson has provided a lot of support for this landmarking. So too has the Old Town Triangle Association. So we recommend that the significant features be preliminarily identified as all exterior elevations, including roof lines of the building. And then on the interior, the overall spatial volume of the residential portion of the building. Aspects of Netsch's field theory on the interior that are significant include the central tower and the arrangement of living spaces extending from it. And so you have a preliminary recommendation to that effect. I can answer questions. I believe Will Forrest, one of the owners, is on the call as well. And consultant who helped us with the report from Altus Works, Annie Gersh is also here.
Thank you, Matt. Does the commission have any questions for Matt at this time? And seeing none, Mr. Forrest, would you like to make a comment?
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll keep my comments very brief. Firstly, I'd like to state what a privilege it is for my husband, Mark Smith, and myself to be a custodian of this incredible home. One thing that we have learned is that it is not just a home, but it is an extension of the community. It was designed in its central space to be able to have community meetings, which both Dawn Clark and Walter Netsch hosted regularly, both for her legal clinic and him for his architectural practice. And we are committed for it to be an ongoing community and informational space for members of both the local community and also for the architectural community of Chicago. We also like to mention that we recognize that this is one of many important mid-century homes in the Old Town district, and we appreciate the context statement of which this is a part, and urge you to consider other homes in the light of both this home, but the broader contribution that many architects made to mid-century housing in the Old Town Triangle area. I'd like to thank Matt Crawford and the Department of Planning and Development. They have been extraordinarily diligent and thoughtful in their submission here. And lastly, I'd like to thank Skidmore, Owings and Merrill for their inspired and sensitive work and keeping true to the exact nature of what Walter Netsch was intending when he built this house. And just to conclude, it's such a privilege and a pleasure to be the custodian of this house. And thank you for your consideration today.
Thank you, Mr. Forrest. Does the commission have any questions or comments for Mr. Forrest? Commissioner Cox.
Yes, and my question, it might be answered by staff or others, but thank you, Mr. Forrest, for your stewardship of this amazing property. And I thought Matt's context about the relationship between the form and the interior helped me understand a little bit why we would be landmarking an interior. I mean, you can't understand this building unless you have a chance to see its interior. But I actually don't recall any other interiors, certainly private residences, that have been landmarked. I was trying to think. There may have been one in Austin. There was a modern house that we landmarked. But if any of the staff could just give us a little bit of a sense of how common this is of landmarking the interior of the house, as well as the architectural form that we all see from the outside.
Thanks, Commissioner. It is rare, but there are examples. So on this slide, you'll see that there's about 13 residential buildings, most of them single family homes, where there are specific features that are called out as significant in the landmark designation. So it's rare. Mm-hmm. And then on the right column, early in the commission's history, going back to the 70s, when they were designating places, they weren't yet in the habit of defining specific significant features. So the general assumption then in the commission's rules and regulations that the entire house, exterior and interior, is assumed to be considered part of the landmark, and that gives the commission at least the chance to review changes to interior. So this is another example where a house will be including interior features, and it's very rare, and we really want to thank the owners for asking us to proceed in this way.
Commissioner Cox, I might add that if in studying Netch's work, truly, he was so instrumental in this style that I'm sure Commissioner Fair will talk a little bit further about, as he lives at UIC for so many days a year. But the spatial quality, the volumes on the interiors are so important because of these geometric shapes that Walter had really emphasized. You can't really tell from the exteriors how important those are until you get inside, and then it becomes so evident. So that's my comment on that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I assume, and I also appreciated the fact that the house had a community function, that the original owners invited people. So it was a gathering space. I don't know if that was an invitation for to come visit the interior, but I'd gladly accept the invitation if it were open. But
given Don Clark's and Walter's the way they operated, there were always people in that house.
And for sure, it was an invitation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Forrest.
Commissioner Fair, let's start with you.
Sure. I just wanted to chime in. It's kind of a treat to, like you mentioned, Chairman Wong, to deal with a lot of Netch's buildings, especially field theory buildings on campus for a living day in, day out, and then see a full circle kind of through his actual residence. So, just would like to thank Mr. Forrest, and then definitely thank the thoroughness of the staff and the report that they put together. because like it was alluded to earlier, that connection of field theory and what that means really to the interior space and that connection to the exterior is really critical to that. You know, we would say, and they shared an image of the behavioral sciences building, which is, you know, one of the iterations of one of the more complete field theory structures. The level of nuance at both the exterior and the experience in the interior spaces are one and the same. So to me, that part of this recommendation makes sense. Really excited to see this one get recommended.
Thank you, Commissioner Fair. Commissioner Jacobitz?
Yes, thanks, Chairman Wong. I just wanted to just express my appreciation for this one and to the owners, you know, for the preservation of this home and for bringing it to preliminary landmark designation. I studied at UIC, and so as part of the grad program there, and had, I guess I say, some intimate experience spending a good amount of time within those buildings and getting lost in a way in those buildings. But I also will kind of attest to that this house was open a lot. I actually was, as part of studying at UIC, we had the opportunity to go visit the home with Mr. Netsch and his wife, and they led a tour of architects, graduate students in the home. So very familiar with the spaces. It's been a long time. I won't mention how long, but you know, it's a very MC Escher-esque interior in a way. And also, funny enough, my father used to speak a lot about Mr. Netsch because my father, who was an architect, was one of Walter Netsch's designers at SOM back in the days. So we'd hear a lot about the field theory and just different stories about him. And then finally, I just wanted to note that there are so many wonderful mid-century homes in Old Town. You know, growing up in the 80s, I just remember seeing all these amazing homes, and it really made a mark on me. They're part of the character of that district, whether it's official or not. And I really hope that there's some way we can look at that and see if we can include those somehow, or more owners step up. So again, it's a wonderful project. Thank you for your stewardship on this building, and yeah, full support. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Jacobitz. Commissioner Rubin?
I have both kind of an accolade and a question. I'll pile on and say thank you, Mr. Forrest, and your husband, Mr. Smith, for being such great stewards of this property. It's truly remarkable. You don't see something like this every day. I'm glad that Commissioner Cox came out as the senior person here to invite himself over, because I figured as the junior commissioner, I'd have no right to do so. But I also want to say that you know, I started my career outside of Chicago in Southern California, where the preservation community really recently completed a years-long program of looking at the 1970s in terms of what are the resources that are coming online that are turning 50 years old to become kind of the next class of historic landmarks, the way we do it in the United States. And it's still hard. The preservation community is coming around to understanding the 1970s and 1980s as being historic, but it's still a very teachable moment to recognize what are the resources out there that are remarkable, and how do you start to honor those so that houses like yours are first in line, and other buildings as they hit that 50-year mark or even 40-year mark follow in the footsteps. So this is an excellent precedent to be setting that I think we should all kind of hold on to for years to come as we think about the next things that we're landmarking. And then my question I wanted to ask you, Mr. Forrest, is have you, since you're looking to, since we're looking to landmark an interior as well as the exterior, have you looked into any of the other options for further protections for the inside of the house, such as a preservation easement? Kind of what's been the what are your plans for the house in the years to come?
Thank you very much for the question. Unfortunately, we learned about the preservation easement and the tax benefits, some of the tax benefits associated with that, just after we'd completed our renovation. But certainly we're so committed to what Don Clark and Walter Netsch created in and around the home, both the architecture and the community, that we will continue to look at other options for preserving and enhancing that and extending it into the future.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Rubin. Commissioner Ponce.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to express my equal excitement about reading the whole packet, and my fellow commissioners. Congratulations for, taking this step. I was curious now, in the packet, there's another image from I'm curious about the landscape, right? And there's very limited open space, right? And I'm curious if you plan to do anything there as well. I think the image prior to this one in the cover of the packet shows much taller trees there. And you just speak a little bit about any open space and any plans that you have to do just to make it that whole complete package. If you're already taking the step of doing the interiors, what about tying the exterior to native landscape?
Thank you very much for the question. First point is, because there's skylights all across the roof, the whole house feels like an exterior space because natural light floods the house at all times of the day and in different ways at different times of the season. There is a small backyard which is very difficult to make out from the layout of the house. And we have preserved the tree that Walter Netsch planted there in 1974, which is now a very large ginkgo leaf tree, which he used as an inspiration for his architectural designs. And lastly, he had made the whole of the top of the garage an outdoor space, which we use also in that same fashion. And that is how we're committed to roughly equivalence with what Walter was doing with the outdoor spaces in the house.
Commissioner Ponce, you said.
No, thank you. Thank you for the answer.
Commissioner Hughes. You're muted.
Yes, sorry about that. Hi, everyone. My apologies for my tardiness today, but this was a really exciting project to review in the packet. And I just have to go on the record to say, to be associated with the SOM today, it's projects like this and the history associated with a firm like this that make me really proud to be a commissioner today and in support of this type of work. The house is obviously extremely iconic, and I second Commissioner Cox's comments about wanting a tour. So whenever the doors open, we'll come flying through and celebrate with you guys. But congratulations on a huge milestone for us here in the city, and just in general, 13 properties is not a lot, for us. And so to head in that direction is very futuristic and groundbreaking for this commission. So I'm very excited about that and in full support of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hughes. We also had somebody else signed up to speak, which was Annie Grish. Would you like to, who was a consultant for the designation report? Would you like to make a statement?
Yes. Hi, commissioners. My name is Annie Grish. I'm an architectural historian with Altus Works. I helped prepare the preliminary summary report for the Netsch House. I just wanted to formally state my support for the potential landmark designation of this building. I think its architectural and cultural significance are clear. And I also believe it serves as a prime example of how important it is to recognize Chicago's more recent past and preserve historic interiors. So kind of just seconding what I've heard from a lot of you, which I appreciate. So thanks for the consideration.
Thank you. Does the commission have any questions for Ms. Grish? Okay, well, if not, I also want to make a comment, really quick comment, and hats off to not only Commissioner Jakowitz's father, who would have been extremely proud to see this, as well as former Commissioner Houlihan, who spoke so highly of his partner in crime, Don Clark Netsch, when he was on the commission, and several other commissioners who have in the past who have really been enthusiastic, would be enthusiastic about this. So I'd like to call for a motion to adopt the preliminary landmark recommendation for the Netsch House. Is there a motion?
So moved, Commissioner Fair.
Commissioner Fair, is there a second?
Second, Commissioner Ponce.
Okay, wonderful. I'll do the roll call. Commissioner Jekowitz,
Yes.
Commissioner Cox,
Yes.
Commissioner Burns,
Yes.
Commissioner Hughes,
Yes.
Commissioner Rubin,
Yes.
and I am an enthusiastic yes as well. The motion carries unanimously. Congratulations. We'll look forward to the future and tours. Wonderful. Next item on the agenda is the preliminary landmark recommendation for Promontory Point in the 5th Ward. This is located at the east side of South Jean-Baptiste Pont de Sable, Lakeshore Drive between 54th and 56th Street in Alderman Hairston's ward. And Candlin, I think you're on for this one. Candlin?
How about that? Is that better?
Wonderful.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Sorry about that.
Okay.
So before you today is a preliminary landmark recommendation for Promontory Point, specifically that portion of the point located east of South Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable Lakeshore Drive between 54th and 56th Streets. This promontory sits toward the southern end of Chicago's 600-acre lakeside Burnham Park. It's a peninsula made entirely of artificial landfill. Its curving landform, edged by stepped limestone revetment, provides views and physical access to Lake Michigan, and it was originally known as the 55th Street Promontory. Although Promontory Point includes property west of DuSable Lakeshore Drive, the drive serves as a distinct division of the property, and it is the peninsular portion to the east, which is a distinct landform and space for the south side of Chicago. Also, it's the area most people think of when they think of Promontory Point. The peninsula includes the Lakefront Trail at its western end as part of the site's circular path, the David Wallach Fountain, 4 council rings, and the stepped limestone revetments, which were part of its original construction. Based on evaluation of the property, Historic Preservation Division staff believe that Promontory Point meets 4 criteria for Chicago landmark designation, including criterion 1 for heritage. Thanks. So renowned architect and planner Daniel H. Burnham conceived of using imported fill to construct linear parkland extending into Lake Michigan along the southern half of the city's lakeshore as part of an ambitious lakefront expansion scheme incorporated into his seminal 1909 plan of Chicago. Promontory Point would be located toward the bottom left in this illustration. Development of new green space along the lake began in the 1910s, but proceeded slowly due to the need for complex negotiations with private owners, approvals from government entities, and funding. From 1910 to 1931, shoreline protection structures were built along the lakefront to create land for parks, harbors, lagoons, and other mostly public spaces. The structures generally consisted of wooden piles, steel tiebacks, Wakefield sheeting, and of either limestone blocks or paved or perched sand beaches. The center illustration at bottom shows the type of revetment installed from 16th to 56th Streets. 2 rows of wooden piling would be driven deep into the lake bottom, each tied together with steel bands. With sheeting in place, this crib, as it was called, was filled with stone. Once the site behind the crib had been infilled, large cut limestone blocks would be set atop the crib and up against the fill to prevent erosion from the lake waters. So here is Promontory Point, sometime in the 1920s or early 1930s. The promontory has been established, but the land has yet to be infilled. By the 1930s, there were 22 independent park districts operating in Chicago. Although civic leaders had spent years discussing the need for consolidation, many of the districts had been reluctant to give up their autonomy. Things changed when the Great Depression rendered most of these agencies financially insolvent, however, and in 1934, voters approved the Park Consolidation Act, thereby establishing the Chicago Park District, and with it, the means to access money through the Works Progress Administration. This was President Roosevelt's New Deal program to provide work to millions of job seekers through the completion of public works programs. In the mid-1930s, the federal government provided relief funds which allowed the newly consolidated Chicago Park District to complete Promontory Point. In the 1936 photo at left, work is underway to complete revetments and grading. The foundation of the Pavilion building, which would function as a public shelter with bathrooms, was beginning to take shape towards the east end. In the 1937 photo at right, the underpass at 55th Street has been completed. Grading of the promontory has been substantially completed as well, with the site gently sloping from east to west. The wings of the pavilion have been constructed and its tower is underway. A curving circuit path has been laid around the perimeter, and trees have begun to be planted around the eastern and western edges of the site. Additional WPA funding secured in 1938 went toward completion of the pavilion revetments and landscaping. Additional plantings continued and landscape elements were installed as well. Dedication of a marble fountain with resting fawn sculpture just inside the entry from the western underpass marked the completion of the 55th Street promontory in 1939. Staff also found that the promontory meets criterion 4 for exemplary architecture. Although the general layout and topography of the new park site had been established and was under construction by 1936, the Chicago Park District tapped new hire Alfred Caldwell, a talented landscape architect, to produce a landscape plan for Promontory Point. His design made dramatic use of the site's prized peninsular views by framing them through narrow views at the north and south ends of a broad central meadow edged with trees and other naturalistic plantings. These also provided a sense of enclosure, which dramatically contrasted with the open perimeter of the site edged by the limestone revetments. Caldwell explained that he created, quote, two distinct experiences: the lofty meadow from which the rocks along the water cannot be seen, and the rocks themselves from which the meadow cannot be seen. In Caldwell's original design, the perimeter space also included 4 circular layered stone benches known as council rings, which symbolized the council fires of North America's native peoples. They're shown in red on the site map at upper left. The Park District had substituted simplified hexagonal concrete benches in their place. But in the late 1980s, the Park District reached out again to Alfred Caldwell, then in his late 80s, who agreed to consult on a landscape restoration project. During the initiative completed in 1989, Caldwell worked with Chicago Park District landscape architects to install the council rings that he had originally envisioned. Caldwell also assessed the existing plantings and found that some historic trees still thrived, but most of the understory plantings had not. He and Park District designers created a replanting scheme that included hundreds of native shade and ornamental trees, most of which had been part of his original plan or were substitutions selected under his guidance. Throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, the Park District continued planting additional trees from this list. From Burnham Park Harbor to 56th Street, all of the revetment along Burnham Park had originally been constructed with stepped limestone blocks. By the 1960s, portions of the revetment surrounding the point had begun to succumb to the elements and surfaces had become uneven. In 1965, the stone platform from the north of the pavilion continuing around the east side of the peninsula was replaced with a concrete platform with deflectors. Since that time, additional erosion has occurred. and partial, oh, I'm sorry, can you please go to the next slide? Thank you. Since that time, additional erosion has occurred and partial repairs, including the installation of riprap stone at the location of the stone platform, have taken place along the northern portion of Promontory Point. That approximate area is shown in yellow on the site map. The area in green is the location of the replacement concrete platform. The majority of the stepped limestone remains in place, however, and is the last mostly intact stretch of stepped limestone revetment remaining along Burnham Park. Architect Emmanuel Buxbaum, the CPD's Chicago Park District's head architect, designed a French eclectic style pavilion with a central tower to perch atop the highest point of the site at its eastern end. The French eclectic style of architecture was one of many revival styles popular, though not necessarily in broad use in America during the 1920s and 30s. Buildings in this style typically featured a brick, stone, or stucco wall cladding and had tall, steeply pitched roofs with no dominant front-facing gables. The pavilion falls under the towered subtype of this style due to its round tower with conical roof at the intersection of two asymmetric gable-roofed wings with the principal entrance. From 1990 to 91, the Chicago Park District undertook a restoration of the pavilion's exterior, combined with rehabilitation of the interior to allow for year-round use. Exterior work included masonry work, repair and replacement of ceramic roof tiles, and preservation of original windows. In the late 1930s, when Promontory Point was nearly complete, Chicago sculptors Frederick C. and Elizabeth Hazeltine Hibbard won a contest to design a sculptural fountain to provide drinking water for, quote, man and beast, in the spirit of the donor David Wallach's wishes. The David Wallach fountain was installed near the Lakefront Trail just east of the 55th Street underpass. Frederick Hibbard designed the base of stacked geometric shapes of polished Dakota mahogany granite. It features a water basin at the front for animals and 3 fountains at its sides for adults and children. The base is topped by a bronze statue of a resting fawn with its legs tucked under its chin, designed by Elizabeth Hazeltine. Staff also believe the property meets Criterion 5 as the work of significant designers. Considered a great 20th century landscape architect of the prairie style, Alfred Caldwell designed and later restored Promontory Point's landscape. In addition to Promontory Point, his body of significant work includes Eagle Point in Dubuque, Iowa, Lafayette Park in Detroit, Michigan, Reese Park on Chicago's North Side, and the Lily Pool in Chicago's Lincoln Park, a designated Chicago landmark. Caldwell worked with famous landscape architect Jens Jensen beginning in 1924 and worked closely with that employer to understand his philosophies and all the philosophies behind the prairie style of Jensen's design. Caldwell worked for the Chicago Park District from 1936 through 1940. Because of his knowledge of plants, his design skills, and his ability to produce detailed plans at an impressively fast pace, Caldwell's superiors put him in charge of the district's most ambitious and high-profile landscape projects. Altogether, he produced plans for approximately 1,000 acres of green space. Next slide, please. Emmanuel V. Buxbaum oversaw the design of the Promontory Point Pavilion from 1936 to 1937. He began his career working as a draftsman for R. Harold Zook, a Chicago architect known for distinctive residential designs and Art Deco style buildings, and was involved in the design and construction of buildings like the Pickwick Theater in Park Ridge, Illinois. In 1930, Buxbaum began working for the Chicago's South Park District and oversaw all of the architectural work it undertook. Projects of that era included the Grant Park bandshell demolished in the 1970s and the restoration of the Japanese Pavilion in Jackson Park, which coincided with the development of the Japanese garden that Alfred Caldwell had worked on. In 1934, when the city's independent park commissions were consolidated into the Chicago Park District, Buxbaum became the CPD's architectural designer. In this position, he oversaw a team of staff architects. He briefly left the Park District in 1941 to serve as architectural designer for the city's Department of Subways and Superhighways and his work there included collaboration with the firm of Shaw, Ness, and Murphy on the streamlined modern design of the State Street subway. In 1946, Buxbaum returned to the Park District and was appointed assistant engineer for design and contracts, a position he held until his retirement in the late 70s. His numerous Park District designs include the 1937 Art Moderne Lake Steamer, Montrose Avenue Beach House, the 1938 North Avenue Beach House, English and colonial style comfort station in locations including Jackson, Columbus, Humboldt, and Washington parks, and more contemporary work, including the Henry Horner Park Field House and a design here shown for the pool at Portage Park for the 1959 Pan American Games, just to give a sense of the scope and breadth of his work in shaping the architecture of Chicago's parks. Next slide, please. Frederick Cleveland Hibbard studied at the School of the Art Institute. He created over 70 commissions nationwide, and major works in Chicago include the Eagle Fountains in Grant Park and the Green Vardaman Black Memorial in Lincoln Park. Both Frank and his wife Elizabeth worked with famed sculptor Laredo Taft. Elizabeth had studied at the University of Chicago and the School of the Art Institute. Specializing in the sculpture of animals, she frequently exhibited her work and won many prizes. She taught at the University of Chicago and was among the artists chosen to exhibit sculpture at the American Art Exhibition of the 1933 Century of Progress World's Fair in Chicago. Her permanent installations include bas-relief of pan figures in the Norton Memorial Hall in Chautauqua, New York, Baby Pegasus at the Illinois State Art Museum, and Baby Centaur at the Vanderpool Memorial Art Gallery in Ridge Park. Next slide, please. So finally, staff believe Promontory Point is a unique visual feature in the city of Chicago. Although landfill created new green space all the way from Grant to Jackson parks during the early decades of the 20th century, Promontory Point is the only peninsular park along the lakeshore. From its earliest days, Chicagoans have delighted in using this space for every kind of group gathering imaginable. This unique space provides views and direct connection to Lake Michigan like no other place on the south side of Chicago. Next slide. This distinctive site has naturally served as a gathering place for groups of all kinds from its opening in 1939. It has hosted the entire spectrum of events, from examples here, such as USO dances for soldiers of World War II, all the way to anti-Vietnam rallies, such as this one of the Hyde Park Peace Council, with civil rights political activist speaker Al Ruby. Next slide. And of course, it has served as a beloved recreation site for all of Chicago's citizens due to its beauty and unique location, providing direct access to Lake Michigan. Staff recommend that the significant historical and architectural features be identified as all exterior elevations and roofline of the pavilion building, and the pathways, council rings, David Wallach fountain, and limestone revetments. Plantings and trees are specifically excluded from the significant features. We have received a letter of support from Alderman Hairston, who is here and would like to make a statement. And commissioners, your packets included the almost 500 letters and emails received in support of this landmark designation. I emailed the few remaining ones that we received this week to you as well. We would like to thank the Promontory Point Conservancy for its decades of advocacy and oversight of the Promontory Park, which have so clearly made a difference in preservation of the original historic fabric. The Conservancy also most recently hired Julia Bachrock as a consultant to draft an initial report for this designation, and we are grateful to have had her expert insights into the subject matter. The Chicago Park District, owner of the site, is represented here by Heather Gleason today, who has a statement. And I would also, before turning my podium over, would like to lay out next steps and a timeline in the event that this designation does move forward. The next step would be the report from the Department of Planning and Development and final recommendation. If these were to be combined at the next commission meeting and were approved by the commission, That recommendation would then be submitted to City Council. If there are no issues, it could be introduced potentially at the March City Council meeting. And again, as long as there are no holdups, it could then go on to the City Council Committee in April and the final consideration by the council the same month. Please let me know if you have any questions, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Candlin. Does the commission have any questions for Candlin at this time? Seeing none, we do have a number of speakers. Commissioner Burns, you had a question for? Oh, now everybody has questions.
Well, I'll
Commissioner
start
Burns,
if that's okay. Thank you. Thanks for the great report. I want to acknowledge Ms. Bacharach for her tremendous leadership in the research and the background. Certainly the Promontory Point Conservancy. I don't think we would be here without their stewardship of this beautiful site. And I want to say again, I said this in the program committee meeting, it seems like almost a year ago when this came forward to the program committee, how impressed I am just as a citizen of Chicago, let alone a commissioner, with the civic engagement and the public input on this and advocacy. It's really a terrific model. So thank you, everyone. My questions for you, Candlin, are two technical ones. And if you don't know the answer to these now, it would be great if you would address them when we meet again about this. The first one is, I'm curious about how, if this site receives landmark status, how would that affect jurisdictional authority for this is really jurisdictionally complex site, right? I can think of the Army Corps of Engineers, the Chicago Department of Transportation, the Chicago Park District, the Illinois Department of Natural Resources Coastal Management Program, the Great Lakes Commission potentially, and it goes on and on. So I'm curious how the landmark status would affect all of those, the interrelations, and what aspects of landmark status would supersede the jurisdiction of any of the other public agencies involved. And then secondarily, I'm curious about if there are environmental legacy issues related to the Nike missile site and things, how that affects the landmark status, both our decision making and subsequently related to the restoration. So both really technical. And so I don't want to put you on the spot. If you can answer them today, great. If not, I'd love to hear about it next time.
Wow, Commissioner Burns, you really know how to throw that question.
Those are great questions. I can tell you just, I'm going to actually pass the baton on to the Chicago Park District, because they've been in the trenches as the owner, working directly with the United States Army Corps of Engineers, the Chicago Department of Transportation, and we've actually talked about, you know, the kind of the overlap. But certainly as an entity, if this were passed, anything that was proposed for the site would come through like any other work comes through the commission. We'd look at the significant historical features and use the commission guidelines. Now, I don't know all the details about how that would be transmitted, but certainly after it's gone through the current Section 106 process, which is where you're referencing the United States Army Corps of Engineers and the federal funding, in long term, it would be, you know, just like any other project. But I'm going to defer to Heather.
Heather's going to be speaking afterward. So Heather, when your time is to speak, if you could address that. I have a couple other commissioners who are signed up to or have questions for Candlin at this time. So Commissioner Fair, go ahead.
Hi, just really looking for maybe a clarification. There was the note that plant species, tree species are obviously left out of this. And my assumption is that that's to, you know, help provide some flexibility in the veins of resiliency for plant species over time. Just wanted to confirm that and make sure that's not potentially leaving us at risk down the line from here.
That's a really good question, and something we thought a lot about. There's something you know, there's a specific quality to a landscape that may not be the same for another type of site. what we did is we looked at what were the elements of the landscape that were critical. And we found that to be that circular path, the revetments at the exterior, the council rings as they'd originally been envisioned, and that fountain. But in general, there's, I actually have a passage because I thought this question might come up if you indulge me. This is from the Secretary of the Interior Guidelines for the Treatment of Cultural Landscape. And it talks about change and continuity with regard to landscapes. It says there's a balance between change and continuity in all cultural resources. Change is inherent in cultural landscapes. It results from both natural processes and human activities. Sometimes that change is subtle, barely perceptible, as with geomorphological effects on the landform. At other times, it's strikingly obvious as vegetation, either in the cyclical changes of growth and reproduction or the progressive changes of plant competition and succession. So this dynamic quality of all cultural landscapes is balanced by the continuity of distinctive characteristics retained over time. For in spite of a landscape's constant changes, or perhaps because of it, a property can still exhibit continuity of form, order, use, features, or materials. So preservation and rehab treatment seek to secure and emphasize continuity while acknowledging change. So when you've got living things, trees, plantings, there is growth and change in and of themselves. And we wanted to exclude them because that is part of the philosophy for cultural landscapes. So we felt that we focused on the elements that would naturally keep the form and the feel of the site intact, that historic landscape as designed, rather than focusing on changing vegetation, changing trees, etc. And I'm sure Heather can be much more eloquent about that since that's her area of expertise. But that was our approach and how we made those, came up with those recommendations for the commission.
Thank you.
I do want to note, we have a number of speakers signed up to speak here. So I'm just going to announce the order in which we'll take them. Heather, you're going to be first. Alderman Hairston, Sue Garza, Jack Spicer, if you have something further to say, as well as Julia. And I think we have Senator Peters also on here. So why don't we go right down the line, and commissioners, if you might be able to hold some notes, or but if something is really urgent you want to have in your mind, let me know, and we'll get that in there as quickly as possible. So Heather, the floor is yours. Thank you for your patience.
Of course. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. My name is Heather Gleason, and I am the Director of Planning and Construction for the Chicago Park District. And we really thank the Department of Planning and the Commission for the opportunity to make a statement today. As property owner of Promontory Point, which resides, as Candlin mentioned, in Burnham Park, we have met numerous times with the community members about how to treat the point, specifically the limestone revetment, which is near and dear to the community's heart. And we most recently met on site with Mr. Spicer and many members of the preservation community and surrounding areas on October 18th, 2022, where we had both CDOT representatives and Park District representatives out there to talk about the point. So as such, we, along with our partners at CDOT, are committed to saving and reusing as much of the existing limestone as possible as part of a rehabilitation effort that would be consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards for historic preservation to make sure that we're protecting Promontory Point for decades to come. But just beyond the limestone that everyone cares so much about, we also support at the Park District this landmark effort that the community put forward in the manner that Candlin described it to you. So the Park District is proud owners of many precious historic park spaces within the city of Chicago, including buildings, landscapes, many precious areas of the city that we all care for. And we really take our responsibility and obligation to maintain them seriously. In fact, our Chapter 10 of our Chicago Park District Code, which I believe when she was at the Park District, actually Julia Bachrach helped to push forward, directs the Park District Administration to identify park properties significant to the heritage of the Park District, the city, the state, or even the nation. So it is something that we take very seriously. Given our commitment to maintaining these beautiful historic spaces, we are very pleased to support the community's efforts to landmark Promontory Point today. And with that, Mr. Chairman, would you like me to address any of the questions that came up from the commissioners, or do you want to move on to your next speaker?
Please, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
Addressing
Yes.
the-
Okay, very good.
Commissioner Burns. Yep.
Sure. So Commissioner Burns, you asked some great questions about jurisdiction. As owner of most of the lakefronts along the entire city's borders, we have multiple overlapping jurisdictions that that we are constantly all working together as a team, really, to help manage and make sure that we're following best practices. So CDOT is our city harbor master. We work very, very closely with their engineers on maintaining harbors, as well as using their engineering expertise. Really, they have more engineers in-house than we do to help maintain our important lakefront spaces. The Army Corps absolutely is a partner, and we also need their federal funding. It is very expensive to maintain these precious lakefront spaces, and so they are definitely a partner that we rely on as well. Some of the other jurisdictions that you mentioned, so for instance, Promontory Point, also at the community's insistence and support, is also a National Register park. So we work with the state of Illinois Department of Natural Resources, which is also gracious in providing us grants for the lakefront when we meet their program guidelines. So there are many jurisdictions, and I think if this action goes forward with the commission today, we will be adding the Chicago Landmarks Commission as one of our partners as projects come forward, as we continue to maintain and rehabilitate the point going forward. And I just want to also second and thank Candelen's explanation, really, of the cultural landscape management and why you haven't seen the trees and the plant species specifically landmarked. Luckily, I have checked with our Natural Resource Department, which does a lot of the maintenance and care of our plant material around the city. And most of the species that Caldwell originally planted for the point are still species that we would plant today in any of our parks: crab trees, maples, things that are recognizable to the Chicago area and Chicago residents, as well as native to our area. So I don't think that you would see those change. And by landmarking the pathways and the council rings and the fountain and the pavilion, we're really maintaining that beautiful meadow space that Caldwell originally designed, as well as making sure that the features of the point are really contributing features to the overall space. And so I just want to thank Candelen for her explanation and say that we at the Park District also agree. And I'm happy to take further questions if there are any.
I do have a follow-up one, Ms. Gleason, thank you, specific to jurisdictional authority. I understand for some time there was tension between community interest, specifically about materials of the revetment, and the Army Corps' plans. And so part of why I asked the question is I'm curious about if the landmark status would affect the Chicago Park District's jurisdictional authority. And I assume, as an ongoing steward and lover of this site, that you're in an sometimes not easy position to balance community interest with government funding, technical needs, et cetera, and the communication between them. And do you see the landmark status as a way to help balance these better than what some folks in the general public have expressed in the past, 5 or 10 years?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the question, Commissioner. That's a great one. It isn't always easy to be the property owner that, for one, obviously people love this space very much. And then there are also other jurisdictions that we have to consult. I do think that just in the last couple of months, we got a big win in that regard. So I'm not sure how many people are aware, but that Congress actually passed a law into law that the Army Corps has to follow what they call the locally preferred plan, which is what we believe the community has been pushing for all these many years. In the past, in the Army Corps' rules, that was not necessarily a foregone conclusion, and usually the local jurisdiction had to really make up any difference in cost if there was a different design solution, for instance, for a particular space. So Senator Durbin, we have to really thank him for his efforts in Washington to add this language into the bill. So we really believe that all of the efforts that the community has made over these many, many years, advocating for the point, advocating for preserving the point, and for really pursuing a historically accurate rehabilitation effort here have paid off. And we think we have what we need to really be able to preserve this space for a long time to come in the manner in which the community would like to see it preserved. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Heather. I also might want to note that, Kendallin had mentioned that Alfred Caldwell was hired on in the 80s to do a restoration project. And I believe, if I recall correctly, the person who hired them, who was in charge at the Park District, was Walter Netsch. So it all ties in together, folks. Alderman Hairston, floor is yours.
Thank you. First, let me say thank you to Commissioner Cox and to Kendallin for that excellent presentation. I don't think that I could add anything. It was so well done. Heather, I have worked with you for more than 20 years. And so I respect what you do. I do have a difference of opinion that comes from the community as to the Park District's role in all of this, because this has been a 22-year effort. And it has been a 22-year effort. This is just the history, right? It has been a 22-year effort because the Park District proposed getting rid of the limestone revetment and replacing it with concrete. And that is when the community joined together to let our voices be heard loud and clear. So it has not been this holding hands, skipping down the roads together with the Park District and the community. And we need to, we need to own that, because if it were that simple, then this could have been done a long time, which brings me to the locally preferred plan. And the study that was commissioned by the Department of Transportation, I am guessing, I have not seen that. I have not been included in any discussions with the Department on Transportation of this Smith report. And do we have a copy of the proposed from the Smith report to replace the limestone revetment with concrete, which takes away all of the character? The Smith group is, they don't have any expertise in historic preservation. And you hear the history of that, and I would hate for that to be destroyed. And as a matter of fact, we as a community will continue the struggle. There have been some things that have been happening, and we have been working for 22 years with the Park District and the Army Corps of Engineers, although within the past couple of years, we have been excluded from conversations and decisions have been made. And here you see the Smith Group and CDOT. I didn't even know that. I don't have a copy. So there's some things that I would like done before we move this forward. And we talked about Congress, but what we didn't talk about is the fact that Congresswoman Robin Kelly earmarked money for a study on the condition of the Promontory Point, which was removed from the Appropriation Committee, right? And nobody seems to know who did that or why or what happened. We have been excluded from getting information about the NEPA review. We were not included as consultants, even though the Conservancy has been working on this project for 22 years. They were not consulted, and everyone knows that they are in existence. So there's some things that have happened here that makes me question, and I want to alert you to it, because if this is to be done in anything other than limestone, it is a no-go for the community. And I think we send Commissioner Burns, you talk about the jurisdiction, the report and the recommendations. We have been working with the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation for the years. And just to your comment about the Nike missile site, we cleaned that up probably, I think it was 2008. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but that has been cleaned. We did all of those sites along the lakefront, so those have been cleaned. But the original agreement from 1993 says that it has to be preservation. And, you know, what the community is seeking is to make sure that the limestone revetment is repaired and restored. And with language regarding the limestone revetment being taken out of documents, the community is still very concerned. We do support the landmarking effort. I mean, that was what we did, but it is not going to be at the expense of having a different jurisdiction come over and put it into concrete.
So I'm not sure whether Heather, if you want to respond to that now, and it probably might not, this may not be the venue for that.
No, it is not. But what I would like for whoever it would apply to get me a copy of the Smith report. I need to know who the people working on this at the Park District, other than Heather, and CDOT are, because I have not been included in any of the conversation, and to find out who it is to have us have the limestone language put back into the report. So I am still asking for the commission's favorable support, but there are some things that stand to change it.
Okay, so Alderman, I'm going to have you and Heather figure this out.
But let me just say this, some of this is a lot bigger than Heather. We have been on this. This is above where she needs to be. So those conversations.
I recall the fight 22 years ago as well. So
right. So I just yeah. Thank you.
All right. Ms. Garza.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Chairman. I'm Alderwoman Sue Sedlowski Garza. I actually represent the South Side Ward, the 10th Ward, and Promontory Point for me is one of my favorite places in Chicago. And I have to agree with my illustrious colleague. This fight has been going on for a very long time. I can remember bumper stickers in the 90s, save the point. So this has been something that's been going on for a really long time. I'm here today to speak to the plan to have this concrete platform and get rid of the limestone. It is unanimous along the southeast side, as well as South Shore, Hyde Park, that the limestone should be saved. I no disrespect to whoever designed that concrete platform, but it is just plain ugly. It takes away from all of the charm. It takes away from, in Candleland, I would be amiss. Your history lesson was magnificent on this piece and fantastic. You should give that little blurb to schools so kids can actually know the history behind such a wonderful gem. And I would appeal to this commission. Your job as commissioners on this commission is to preserve and protect our national treasures. And I consider Promontory Point to be one of Chicago's finest treasures. Caldwell's work should be preserved, and his intentions was not a concrete platform, I can tell you. And I think Alderman Harrison, you're right. I think if they go ahead with doing a concrete platform, I think you will have a very big fight on your hands from many, many, many people that want to see this limestone preserved. And Candleland, you said that this limestone is the last stretch, right? It's the last stretch. So that's what makes it so unique. And if, like I said, Congress passed this locally preferred plan, that would be Save the Limestone 100%. I find it really, and Alderman Harrison, I was listening to you speak, I find it really disrespectful and disheartening. And I'm not pointing fingers at anybody on this call, but to not include the alderman on something that she's been working on for 20 years is so disrespectful. We are the first line of defense. And if something happens, whether it be good, bad, or ugly, we're the ones that get the calls. We're the ones that have to take the heat. We're the ones that have to make the explanation. She should have been included every step of the way on every single thing that went through this. And CDOT, and if you aren't privileged to these reports and all these other studies, shame on whoever kept them from you. I want to be on record as saying that. Yeah, this is such a wonderful place, and I hope that we can save the limestone. It's what the community has been asking for. It's what people have been lobbying for and fighting for. That's why I'm here. I just want to see the limestone be saved and not some concrete platform that takes away from the whole charm of what makes this so unique and such a treasure. And I'm so in support and excited that that this is up for landmark status. It's been a long time coming. Let's preserve it the way it should be preserved, and let's not change it altogether. So thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Garza. We're going to go down the line of folks who signed up to speak. Jack, do you have anything further to add?
I do. A couple of really quick points, if you don't mind. Can you hear me, Ernie?
Yeah, we sure can.
First place, as the locally preferred plan stands right now, it is total demolition of the limestone, replacement with concrete and steel, and maybe some decorative use of the remaining limestone blocks. That's the way it stands now, and that has to be changed before any progress can be made. A real preservation project, there's 3 different sections of the point. There's part of the section on the south side that is in really good shape and really just needs to be repaired in place. The north side has some more severe damage, and it needs to be restored, and that means it's taken apart to a degree and then replaced. The east end where the coffins are, the wave deflectors, that can be rehabbed, maybe to make that the ideal place for ADA accessibility. But if rehab is the only one of these 3 things that's used, that could justify the demolition and the replacement with concrete and the decorative use, the only decorative use of limestone. We want to stop that. It's the entire Secretary of Interior standards needs to be taken in place here. And that's a very sophisticated, and as soon as this landmarking thing happens, then the invitation is to be more strict and follow those standards. And if that's done, that will be great. Last thing, just to be sure everybody knows, there is no imminent danger at Promontory Point. There's no place where the point is actually eroding. There's no place where there's danger to Lakeshore Drive with storm overtopping and the revetment. And there's no private property that's endangered. In South Shore, there's serious damage there and serious danger, and that needs to be addressed. But that's not the case at Promontory Point. Promontory Point, the revetment is still doing its job, and it needs to be restored and preserved. Thank you very much, Ernie.
Thank you, Jack. Julia, would you like to add anything? Julia Backrack, sorry.
Hi, I don't want to take up much time, and I want to thank Jack and the Conservancy and Alderman Hairston for having had the opportunity to do the research on this for the last several years. But I do want to add, and I really appreciate working with Candlein. So I know you're not thrilled to hear this, but I do want to add, as kind of an expert on cultural landscape preservation, I think it would be remiss not to add the word planting design to the critical features. It would be consistent with other Chicago landmark nominations. And we all have to remember that the idea of landmark designation is something that we leave behind. So we know we've been all working together for many years, and so many of us know each other. And this is, you know, it's a joy because so many of us love this place so much. But there will be future generations that will be taking over as the stewards of this place. And it's not important to put every tree, every shrub where Caldwell cited it, but the planting design itself is a meadow in the center, edged by irregular groupings of plants. And so that I just wanted to, since we're getting a little in the weeds, and sorry for the sorry for the pun. I think it's really important that I kind of like to go on record and say that even though Candlin strongly suggested that the word site includes landscape, critical features, something about landscape design should be in there. And again, just that this has been such a joy to work on, and I'm so thrilled that we got to this day and hope that we see the completion of the designation. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Heather, did you want to respond to something? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I also just, we can have further conversations about this, but the image that you're showing was, I believe, the Park District did not see that image and we own the property. I believe that was part of an emergency FEMA application that CDOT put in along lots of lakefront sites in 2020 when there was all kinds of lakefront damage. I actually asked if Dan Burke could join the call because it was CDOT's application. But we very well understand the community's long fight to keep the limestone. And as property owner, our intention is to maintain the limestone. I also believe that CDOT's intention is to maintain the limestone. I don't know why Smith Group submitted that as part of an emergency FEMA application back when we were getting high lake levels, but it looks like that's what happened. I understand the community's fear about it, but I want to be clear about the Chicago Park District as the property owner of Promontory Point. Our intention is to follow the community's wishes to maintain and preserve the limestone. Thanks, that's all I needed, Mr.
You're being recorded.
I know.
She is recorded there.
But
Dan,
she's not
would you like
the
to
chair,
do-
she is not the superintendent of the Park District.
That is true.
Let me just say that. I think that that's important. And Heather, I think this just drives home why CDOT should have reached out to me. That, the communication or the
Alderman,
lack thereof.
CDOT is on
I
the-
have
on
no
the-
idea what it is. I didn't get a copy of the report. I see this, I see the concrete. As far as I'm concerned, that's it. I'm sorry, Ernie.
Alderman, CDOT is on the call right now, and I'm asking for Mr. Burke to respond to that. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon. Dan Burke, Chicago Managing Deputy Commissioner, Chicago Department of Transportation. Good afternoon, Chairman Wong. Chairman Wong, could you please repeat the question? I just logged in.
There was a question regarding an image that Alderman Hairston had put up regarding a replacement of, it was a concrete platform at Promontory Point that I believe Smith Group had provided.
Okay.
Alderman, do you want to, are you able to share that again?
That's coming from another part of my office. Lenita, can you?
I can share it. Just give me a
I
second.
think you all, okay. Handling, thank you. Dan, I talked to CDOT and asked who the person was, and I still have no response from CDOT.
Okay. Alderman, I'm not sure. I think this might have been part of a BRIC grant application or something, but that is not representative of anything contemplated for Promontory Point. I believe as Heather Gleason had stated, again, it will be a rehabilitation. It will be a historic rehabilitation. We don't anticipate.
And all I can go
anything.
on is what's written and what's produced. I didn't produce it. You see that the CDOT logo is right there at the bottom of that screen. So you're the one with the information, not me. So you all need to figure that out and get with me so we can have the discussion.
Okay, Alderman, understood. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Alderman, Alderman Hairston and Garza. Commissioner Cox, please.
Thank you, Chairman Wong, and thank you, Alderman Garza and Hairston. It helps to have people with a long tenure of shepherding projects like this because you have the history that helps me understand why there's so much confusion around something that I think many of us see as a foregone conclusion. That Promontory Point with its material and historic culture is to be preserved. So I'm thrilled that we are here today to do that work. But I now understand why there's so much confusion around this, particularly given the multi-jurisdictional oversights and so forth. But be that as it may, I think we are in a very, very good place. So thank you for being such amazing stewards and keeping everyone honest. I have a feeling that your advocacy is going to have to extend beyond your retirement because this is going to be a long haul. So you're not finished yet.
Yes, I'll still be in the community.
Exactly.
And I will chain myself to the tree if I have to.
Exactly. But I just wanted to make perhaps have Candlin address this issue of the that was brought up, I think, by one of the residents about why the decision to take the landscape trees and their formation on the point out of the cultural landscape designation. Because I think most landscape architects would tell you those trees and the organization of the space is as much a part of the cultural landscape as the limestone, embedments. So I know, given the timeline that you described about our ability to designate this, well, this could happen before the tenure of Alderman Garza and Hairston is over. And I think I would hope that is something that they both would like to see happen before they retire. But if we have to amend this to begin to talk about the planting design, I have to assume that we're going to have to do a survey of the trees, and it's going to be a multi-month process, and we will not be able to meet that timeline that you described. Now, I see you're not agreeing, but I think what I would like Candlin to do is to tell us what it would mean to modify our recommendation to include the planting design of Promontory Point. And if it has no consequence whatsoever, and we can just stay on this course, then I think we can consider it. But there may be other ways to address the very, very valid point that you make, and I agree that the landscape, it's in the name. Trees are a part of the cultural landscape. So if you could give us some context so that we can understand, how we should interpret this portion of the recommendation.
Sure. So as you know, the commission guidelines and standards are based on the National Register's standards for rehabilitation. The National Park Service also puts out a number of preservation briefs. Sorry, I'm getting a little technical here, but one of them is about protecting cultural landscapes. So it's basically best practices in terms of approach. How do you think about this? And one of the first steps that they require is that there is a cultural landscape report. That would be the primary report that documents the history, significance, and treatment of a cultural landscape. But it includes obviously looking at the plantings over time, any type of loss, any type of alteration. We do not have that. We don't have the in-house expertise to do that. So we are at a disadvantage in being able to accurate or appropriately assess that. So my concern would be, as Commissioner Cox is saying, without that type of assessment, I don't know that we could do it justice accurately. Also from this, what typically happens then is you develop, and there are other ways to deal with this, you usually develop a treatment plan based on this. And that can often be a recommendation that is included in a report. And that can be maintenance, that can be restoration, it can include a whole scope of things. So that is what we're doing now. Absolutely doesn't preclude the Chicago Park District from doing something like that. In fact, this is more in the wheelhouse of the Chicago Park District. And I would at least suggest, based on their past behavior in 1989, calling on Alfred Caldwell to come in and do a partial restoration. And in 1990 to 91, spending the resources to rehab the existing pavilion, that this is the kind of thing that they do undertake. And I believe there's even some, funding right now. Heather had mentioned for more rehab work on the site. So we don't typically do these types of reports. I'm sure it would take
Sure.
several months, and my fear is, like you said, I would love to get this done while Alderman Hairston is still in office and still able to speak positively about this when it comes to City Council for a vote.
I think that clarifies for me. I mean, is it possible that, it sounds like you're right, that we probably perhaps should hear from Heather, but it could be that a second phase of our work, once this is designated, could be to actually do a inventory of the plant material, the trees, and document that part as another phase of development. I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of curious why Julia is shaking her head no, but it sounds like a path would be, because we don't have the expertise to extend to plant material and all of that. And it would add months and months if we tie, well, I beg to differ. We would have to have surveys of horticulturalists that go out, document I absolutely think so. The years of the trees, their health, it's a survey unto its own right. But Heather, can you speak to us? Because I don't want to derail the action that we were ready to take.
Sure, absolutely. I agree with you that we don't want to derail this effort. I think we all are in agreement that the point should be landmarked. So I don't think that's a challenge. And if it, I would be very happy to let Julia speak on the subject. She worked for the Park District for many years. But there is one thing, we take care of the landscape every day in the Park District. So I do think that the way that Julia potentially worded what she was suggesting adding is something that I think, since this is a preliminary designation, that we can continue to have some discussions and maybe get some more detail around. Because I think what the Park District would be concerned about is landmarking all the branches on a particular tree. Trees age. Sometimes we have storms that knock branches down. I don't think all of you want to review every leaf and branch in Promontory Point. What she was referring to, and Julia, you can correct me when you get a chance to speak here, is really sort of the manner of the plantings, the setting of the plantings, the way in which the plants are arranged, the way in which the trees are arranged. I think that's something that we can all, work on together as this report continues to go forward and potentially come to something that would make the community happy and we would be able to maintain the landscape in that way.
Julia, I'm going to give you a couple seconds here to respond to that, or to agree with Heather real quick.
Yes, in very general terms, if you do look at the guidelines for historic landscapes, you look at a number of elements, and planting design, and I certainly don't need to tell Ernie this because you know this, is really just the general use of spaces. So all I'm really saying is that that's a meadow in the center with dense plantings around the edges. And if somebody came back later and decided to just make a forest in the middle, you wouldn't be having Alfred Caldwell's landscape. So nothing that needs to know every species, every tree, every shrub, just that the general planting design. And if you read the Alfred Caldwell Lily Pool designation, it's more detailed in its list of critical features. So sorry to open a can of worms, because I totally agree. This is so important. And I'm just sort of thinking about the future. So thank you again for.
Thank you, Julia. Commissioner Hughes.
Yeah, I was just gonna chime in and say, if it's something that is intensive, we've done it in the past where there's an amendment added to a designation later. Is that something that's an option, Candlin?
Yes, this is a preliminary report, and we could, if the commission so desired, come back with a, when it comes to the final, it could be amended to reflect, whatever the commission wanted to see.
Okay, great. So it's not, we don't
This is
have.
not
okay.
this is not a train that can't be
This is
stopped.
a
We can't stop this
preliminary
one.
designation.
Okay, great, perfect. So that's an option on the table for all of us to consider.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Burns.
Thank you. I want to go back for the benefit of the public and also the benefit of the public record. I want to go back to what we continue to hear from the community about their desire for the limestone to be saved. Alderman Harrison, I really appreciate you letting us know about the locally preferred plan. And it sounds to me, but I'd like an affirmation from this from historic preservation staff, that the preliminary recommendation, which includes the limestone, means that definitively the limestone that the community wants saved will be saved if this site receives landmark status. So just an affirmation of that would be really helpful for the public record. And if that is the case, or I guess in support of that, forgive me if I'm overstepping my bounds here, but I think it would be really meaningful to the public to see in the landmark recommendation that the recommendation includes and respects the locally preferred plan, and that will take precedent, even if we know that to be the case within all of the statutes and all of the details for the general public, without having to understand and follow the statutes, that they see that loud and clear in the report and in the final recommendation.
Chairman Wong looks otherwise engaged. Sue Ellen, do you mind if I just pop in and respond to
Yes,
that?
please.
Okay,
please.
okay.
Thank you.
Two things. When you look at a landmark designation, really what we're doing is we're assessing, is the resource such that it meets the two criteria? And if so, what's protected? What they don't do is they don't prescribe, and then you're going to do commission, you're going to save this, and you're going to save this, and you're going to save this. And we want to, I would suggest, be careful about being prescriptive, because God knows we are not engineers. We don't know what's going on out there. I think the Secretary of the Interior standards, when I was doing permits, I always explained to people the goal is whatever work you're undertaking, we want to bring it back to what it was historically. And in some instances, you may need to rebuild a foundation, but the house has to be at the same grade as it was, or you may need to do windows, but they need to look like the historic. So I think ultimately the Secretary of the Interior standards will prevail, and their goal is to bring it back to the historic. But I just would be concerned if there were some engineering reason that maybe this underneath the visible limestone, something had to be done to provide a safer structure. I wouldn't want the commission to be boxed in where it couldn't approve any kind of replacement, because the Secretary of the Interior standards do allow, when needed to preserve a historic resource, that some things may need to be replaced. So that's my thoughts on it. And because initially, I think I even included exactly what you're saying, and let's save the limestone revetments. But we had a discussion, and really that is prescriptive. And that's not really the role of this document and this action per se. So those are my thoughts.
So and that's, in my comment, perhaps I'm way overstepping my bounds. Whatever we can do as a commission, and with the support of the historic preservation staff and the Department of Planning, to say we hear you, community, and we support your desire. And we will do whatever is within our ability and within that, and to say it loud and clear for the public so they don't have to search through the statutes, I think would be an incredibly meaningful gesture to the community, particularly in response to the tremendous advocacy that we've seen and the incredible leadership of Alderman Harrison.
Very important. Why we can work on something to include that would address that concern for the community. So let's work on that for the final, if that's okay.
Commissioner Burns. Jack Spice, Jack, go ahead. You're always very on point.
Commissioner Burns, very good points, but I want to make a technical point that's very important. When we say the locally preferred plan, that's a government agency, official, legal, lawful term. It doesn't, that's not what the community wants. What the community wants is true, genuine restoration. What the current version of the locally preferred plan, which has been proposed by the Park District and the Department of Transportation and the Army Corps, is demolition and replacement with concrete. They can change that, but they haven't. But that's so originally the Corps is, the federal government's required to do the cheapest possible way to solve this problem. If the city and the community wants to do different, they have to pay up the additional cost. But what they've chosen as the locally preferred plan is not what the community wants. What the community wants would be totally workable, salvageable, and much cheaper than what's being proposed under the current version of the locally preferred plan. That's not what we want. What we want is true restoration under the Secretary of Interior standards, just as Candlin described. Okay, both repair, restoration, and rehabilitation. That gives tremendous flexibility given the conditions in various spots of how to manage them. And really professional preservation architects and engineers will figure out how to do it the best way. That's what we need is open, objective engineering expertise brought to bear on this as a preservation project. So it's a really good point you made, but the locally preferred plan is a government term. It's not what the community wants. That can be changed and should be changed as quick as possible. And that's up to the Park District and the Department of Transportation and the Army Corps to change what they now want to call the locally preferred plan to something that's true preservation. Thank you.
Thank you,
Chairman Wong, I would like to know from the Park District or CDOT whether we have a locally preferred plan that we are held to, because this is the way that it's being described is not how I understand it. So could someone clarify whether we have some obligation to go with the locally preferred plan adopted by whom, when, and so help us. Thank you.
Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Wong, Chairman Wong. Jack, in reference to your question, you're referencing a plan from, I believe, 2005 that is no longer relevant. That project was closed. It is 2023. We're 17 years later. The locally preferred plan is, as CDOT, as Park District, as Commissioner Biaggi has stated several times on the record. I mean, we're committed to a plan reusing the existing limestone and doing it as part of a rehabilitation that will be consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards for historic preservation. So please, can we stop discussing what was proposed in 2005? It is no longer relevant. Let's put it to rest. Let's not talk about that again. We are in complete agreement with you on how you want to proceed on this. There is no argument here.
Great, that's perfect. Thank you very much. That's
Thank
now
you.
publicly stated, and it has not been publicly stated until now. And
It's
now
been
on the
publicly
record.
stated several times.
It's on the record, and I appreciate it very much. The community is very happy to hear that.
Thank you, Dan. Heather, do you want to add to that or?
No, just to second what Dan said, we've actually stated it over and over and over again that we agree with the community. So I think Dan put it perfectly. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. With all of that said, and I think there's clarity here. We've discussed this quite a bit. Are there any more questions or discussion? This has been enlightening to me as I've spent a lot of my years at the Point as well through high school. Too many things that I probably don't want to tell you. So with that and experiencing a lot of things that growing up in Hyde Park, the Promontory Point is certainly near and dear to my heart as well. So with that, I'd like to call on a motion, adopt a motion to adopt the preliminary landmark recommendation for Promontory Point. Is there a motion?
So moved, Commissioner Burns.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second, Commissioner Hughes.
Wonderful. Commissioner Deckwitz,
Yes.
Commissioner Cox,
Yes.
Commissioner Fair,
Yes.
Commissioner Hughes, or did you second it? You did second, sorry. Commissioner Ponce,
Yes.
Commissioner Rubin,
Yes.
And I am a yes as well. The motion carries unanimously. Folks, there you go.
Thank you.
22 years.
Yeah, right. Commissioner Wong. Yeah, I just, while all the women are here, I do want to acknowledge this amazing outpouring of support that we've received for the designation. Literally hundreds and hundreds of letters. And I think it all pointed to the kind of unique relationship that people have with this place. You know, this is probably the most unique location on the Great Lakes. I mean, I think people brought stories. I mean, the images that people had, the photographs, it was really quite moving. And I think this is, you know, this is a moment to celebrate, and we're taking the first step in honoring all those memories. And, you know, it's truly a cultural landscape. And I had never had any doubt about this in my mind, so I couldn't quite understand what all of the upheaval was about. But I understand, I had a little bit of a history lesson tonight. But there has been no formal opposition to this designation. I couldn't find a single agency, a single department, the mayor's office. It was, so I think there was a lot of misunderstanding, and I think a lot of the lack of jurisdictional clarity, a lot of that has contributed to it. But I think we're in a great place. I think the city and the public agencies are aligned with the advocates that, you know, this is an important peninsula, both in terms of material, its design, its landscape. And so we share, I think, in celebrating with the advocates this first pass towards a landmark status. I just wanted to restate that and thank everyone again for the deliberation, very robust conversation that the commission has had. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cox. Alderman, did you want to make one quick?
I just wanted to say thank you to everybody, and Commissioner, I'd be happy to sit down and have coffee with you and fill you in on the past 21 years.
I'll take you up on that.
A long
All
coffee.
right.
Maybe at the Metch House.
There you go.
Okay. Okay, last couple items on the agenda, permit review committee reports, and Commissioner Jekowitz.
All right, thank you, Chairman. The Permit Review Committee reviewed 2 projects at its December 8th, 2022 meeting. Both projects were approved with conditions, and the report summarizing the scope of the proposed projects and the committee's decisions was included in your packets. This report is for your information and for the record.
Thank you. And Emily.
Thank you, Chairman. For the month of December, staff reviewed 101 permit applications. A total of 103 reviews were performed by staff, and the average number of days to issue approval or corrections was 4.
Thank you. Does the commission have any questions for Emily or Commissioner Jekowitz regarding permits? If none, we'll go on to the announcements. The program committee's review of suggestions received from the public for Chicago landmark designation and nominations to the National Register of Historic Places will be held on Friday, January 27th, 2023 at 2 o'clock. It will be virtual, so go to www.chicago.gov/CCL for the link. Deadline submissions are due on Tuesday, January 17th at 4 o'clock. And they must be submitted on the suggestion form available at the Chicago Landmarks website at chicago.gov/DPD. With that, no further business. I'd like to request a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion?
So moved.
All right.
Commissioner Cox.
Second.
Seconded, Commissioner
All in
Jekowitz.
favor? Aye.
Aye.
And Commissioner Jekowitz Your call.
Thank you, Chairman. We're going to take a 10-minute break and we'll start the permit review committee at 3:20.
All right, folks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye all.